Welcome, everybody. Welcome. It should be on. There's no speakers here. This is more for recording for the online bit. So, my name's Chris Green. I'm with DEEP. Welcome tonight. We have a talk here by Miranda Myles of the Vancouver Emergency Management Agency. Yep. And she's going to be speaking mostly about the emergency support services, what they offer, how they operate, and also a little bit about her own organization, which is known as VEMA as well too. So Miranda's a manager at VEMA, and she's been here before, so welcome to have her back, and I'll pass it over to her. Miranda.
Thanks so much, Chris. Just checking, is the microphone working okay now? Good. Yes, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I'm happy to be here. It's always nice to get out and meet with community groups and share some of what we're working on and some of our programs. I will try to project, but if I see anyone, just give me like a signal if you're not hearing me very well. As Chris said, I am Miranda Myles. I am the manager of Community Readiness with the City of Vancouver's emergency management program, which is called the Vancouver Emergency Management Agency. We're not a separate agency. We're a department within the city. We fall under the Office of the Chief Safety Officer, along with workplace safety and the city's protective services. So that's our kind of organizational structure. So as I dive in here, I'll just start with an Indigenous land acknowledgement. So I want to acknowledge that we're here on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and how those folks have cared for this land since time immemorial. And then we're going to just, as Chris said, the bulk of my presentation is going to be about the Emergency Support Services team and what that group is. We can talk about some of the steps to join if you're interested in doing that as well. I know you're very busy folks and come out to things like this, so we can talk a little bit about that. But I'm also going to give a bit of information about some of the other public-facing programs and services that we have within our team and from the city. With regard to emergency management. I'm not going to get into all of the different plans, but we'll talk about some of the things that are public facing that are things you might be interested in, and some of them are relatively new. So if you're familiar with things already, there might be a few new tidbits in here for you. So that's going to be the order of business. So what are some of those things that we have available for people to access for emergency preparedness? Just to start, our team in VEMA is small and mighty. We're about a team of 10-ish, and we work on a broad spectrum of things related to emergency preparedness. We do not have lights and sirens. We don't have the gadgets. We're not the ones out there fixing things when damage occurs, but we do play a coordinating role across city departments, and we also coordinate plans. And when an emergency happens, we activate our emergency operations center and do other activities to help coordinate across the city. And then we also do things like disaster resilience and risk reduction. So looking at how can we reduce our risk to those emergencies over time? Where can we invest our time and energy in that? How can we better understand our hazards? We also do public education programming, which I'm going to share a little bit about. We do some regular workshops on emergency preparedness through the library and through ActiveNet, through the community centers. And then we also have things that help us when there is an emergency. So you may be familiar with some of the containers that you see around ours. So we have two different kinds of containers. So one is disaster staging areas, and I think we have 6 of those. And those are places where city staff would convene following an earthquake to come together and start to do damage assessment work. And then we also have our emergency support services supply containers, which there's one at pretty much every community center across the city, and those have cots and blankets and some other supplies. We have our emergency support services program, which I'm going to talk about. We also have staff that are on 24/7 waiting for a call if something happens. And I'll talk about some of our statistics in how frequently we activate our ESS team as we get into it. So that's just a cross-section of some of the things we do. Some of our team is involved in FIFA planning, because of course that's a huge event coming to the city that will bring a lot of visitors, so we're doing some of that work. lots of things, and all sorts of different hazard planning, including heat and earthquake and all that kind of stuff. So no shortage of things on the to-do list. The first thing I'm going to talk about, just as we dive into some of the things that I want you all to know about, is our public alerting tool. So public alerting can feel a bit daunting and a little confusing because there's some alerts that you get that come just straight to your phone that you didn't sign up for. Those have a very high threshold and come through the provincial system called a BC Alert System, which is going to be tested tomorrow. So heads up, 155, I believe. Okay. I'll double check that before the end and we'll make sure, but if you're taking a nap or something, you might get jarred awake. But yeah, tell your friends just in case they get scared by it. But yes, it is tested twice a year, usually in May and then in November. We also have this alertable app, and this is something that you have to download. And this is something that the city can send messages through directly, and we can control at what threshold we use that. So we have a little bit more control over it, and it is one of the fastest ways for us to get information out to a broad, wide range of people. Of course, we would use other tactics too, like media releases and traditional media and radio and all those other types of things, but this is definitely the fastest thing we have at our disposal. And so really encourage you to take a peek at that. I had left some postcards about this at the table. I know some of you came in before I did, so you may not have seen those. And now we're just changing all by ourselves. Okay. But we do have information on our webpage. So vancouver.ca/alerts is where you would find active alert information, which right now there are none, which we like. Or you can go to Get Alerts, and that explains it. The great thing about this app, which is not the case with the provincial app, is that the information will come into your phone in the language that you have your phone set in. So if you know someone who doesn't speak English or isn't able to read in English, prefers a different language, this app will do machine translation so that they can get that information without us having to go through a translator. And you can also personalize your settings in here. So if you don't like the big, loud, scary sound that comes from the provincial test, you can kind of turn things up and down, and you can turn off different types of alerts if you prefer. So there's some customization you can do with this. So yeah, take a peek at this. If you don't already have it, encourage you to get it. You don't have to put in any personal information into the system. You just select the locations that you would like. And there are other places in BC that use this app. So North Shore, for example, uses it. Burnaby is using it. Victoria, lots of other places. So if you travel, you could sign up for those locations too. Some other pieces that I want to point out. So we do have a lot of information on our website. So we have two key sites that I would recommend. So one is vancouver.ca/beprepared, and the other is vancouver.ca/EP learning, so emergency preparedness learning. And the first page gives you details about how to do some personal preparedness work, and it also links off to our hazard information. So there's information, for example, this box here is showing just some of the stuff that we have on there related to extreme heat, for example. So if you want to get a little more granular after doing sort of the bigger preparedness pieces, you can get into different hazard information. And I'll talk a little bit more about our hazards in a minute. And then the other page, the EP Learning, and that's where you can access a 20-minute video, which is a great way to just learn about those basic emergency preparedness practices. Or you can sign up to attend a session that one of our team hosts. So we do those periodically throughout the year through either the library or through ActiveNet. So, and lots of stuff on there is also translated. So we've been doing a lot of work to try to make sure information is available in multiple languages. So again, if you're connected to other groups that maybe share information and have connections to folks that English is not their first language, we do translate our material in, I think it's up to 13 languages now. So lots of stuff, and we're continually adding things there as well. And one other thing I wanted to point out, last year we actually did a study on public preparedness with UBC. We worked with some researchers there, and we did a survey which about 3,000 people in Vancouver responded to, which was great to see. Of course, it's not everyone, and there's lots of folks missing from that number, but we weren't sure what to expect, and we were happy with that result. And from that, UBC actually prepared a full report and analysis that is available on their website. If you search Understanding Disaster Preparedness in Vancouver, the work of these folks will come up, and the executive summary is available in 11 languages. But what that showed us was really just confirmed, I think, a lot of things that we thought, but we weren't sure about. So a couple of interesting things that came out of that were earthquakes and wildfire smoke were at the top of people's concerns. Folks that were renting their home had a lot more feelings of vulnerability than those who own, particularly when it comes to being able to secure their space and stay cool and all of that kind of stuff. People are concerned about the cost of emergency preparedness and feel that it can be overwhelming. So one of the things that we want to do is actually up our messaging around the fact that you can take very low cost or almost free steps, many free steps to do something for your emergency preparedness. So that's something that we want to emphasize going forward in our messaging. And people do want more information about this topic. There's a lot of information that's out there, but it's a lot of times through government web pages, and you have to seek it out. And so working with community groups like this and coming to meetings like this and you telling a friend and that kind of thing helps to cascade that information out. So there's lots of things that we want to look at in terms of how we expand our reach with this information. So anyway, interesting report that just got released in October of this year. And some great work by the researchers at UBC and some lessons learned that I think apply to many places, not just Vancouver, but it was great to have them focus on us. All right, I'm gonna move into a couple things just talking about our hazards and how we have, what information we have about different hazards. So about 2 years ago now, we did release an updated hazard list, hazards of greatest concern in Vancouver. There is a council information on that that went to council. And so these are some of the top hazards that came out. I'm not going to go into each one of these, but what I would like to share is that we are working on this very helpful and interactive tool that is available through our webpage, vancouver.ca/hazards. And we're continuing to build on this, and we'd like to have this basically what it does is it takes complicated kind of hazard analysis information and presents it in a way that's digestible, and you don't have to read an 80-page report to go through it. And right now we have, I think, 4 hazards on there, and we have a 5th one that will be added before the end of the year. So earthquake information is on here, heat, coastal flooding, and I think extreme, which one was our last one? Wildfire smoke scenarios. So there's lots of information on there, and you can kind of deep dive into different pieces of information. There's some mapping in there. There's tips to stay prepared. There's some really great graphics that sort of depict what you can do. And so this is a new educational tool that we have to help people understand risks in Vancouver. And we're really excited about it, so check it out. So that's on there as well. And then I think this is my last little section before I get into the ESS program. One of the other programs that we have is called the Resilient Neighborhoods Program, and I know Deep took part in a pilot a number of years ago that actually helped to launch this program. And so really what it is recognizing that community is the first to adapt after an emergency. Government can be slow. And so people will adapt to the needs that they have right in front of them and find ways to problem solve. And so we want to encourage that place-based activity. And as many of you know who work at neighborhood houses and all of that kind of stuff, you see that every day, dealing with day-to-day stuff. And that, of course, extends in emergencies as well. So we want to really build that, and we're looking for ways to bridge the gap between government and those community groups and exchange information more often. So this is a program that we're continuing to develop. My colleagues are really working on this. We have about 15 partners that we've provided some funding to, particularly around heat. And then there's a growing network of about 50 that are part of this Amplifier Partners group, which I believe Deep has also signed up for. And those folks are helping us cascade information. We're sharing seasonal information with them at the beginning so that everyone knows what resources are available and can help us kind of with some of that information spread. But also it's a two-way kind of exchange, so we can hear what concerns there are, what questions there are. It helps us adapt our material and our messaging and our work as well. So that's one of the programs that we're really excited about growing right now. So I'm just gonna actually pause there. That was a lot. But yeah, just some of the highlights that I wanted to share about some of the things our team is working on before I get into our ESS section, which is gonna take us into an introduction to this program, and you can ask me questions about that at the end too. Any questions right now though? I'll maybe take like one or two if there are.
When you're working with containers, like the supply, actually, we're just sort of heads up about, is that specific to some areas where those containers are supplied, or I guess the community or the hub has to apply for it, and also is that through the Parks Board, or is it the Parks Board and the city kind of work together? Or?
Yeah, I can answer that. So I think there's two different things. So the container that's, one of the containers that's here that is Deep's, and that's a community initiative that received some funding as part of the pilot that we did back in 2018 or 19. But generally speaking, the other containers that I mentioned are managed by our team. And they are at, the emergency support services containers are at 26 community centers. And those are paired with community centers in the event that we need to activate group lodging or have people stay there, or a reception center or something like that. And then the other 6 that I mentioned, those disaster staging areas, those are spread sort of geographically across the city at parks, but are also managed by our team. Yeah, so that's kind of how that works. Containers are everywhere. Yeah. Yeah, we got the containers. They're out there. They got stuff in them.
Deep's container is the only non-city one in the city.
That we're aware of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kerrisdale is hoping to get one, but they're not there yet, right? They've got something.
Yeah, and some places have, like, I think Britannia has done some work in different ways. They didn't do a container, but they've done, some different planning around food and things like that. So different groups across the city kind of looking at this in different ways. But those ones that I mentioned are specifically managed by our team. Yeah. Okay, well, mull on your questions. We come back to this section at the end, no problem. I'm going to dive into our next section, which is on emergency support services, or ESS. I will try my very best not to use acronyms, but please stick a hand up if you hear me say something and you don't know what it means. I will correct myself. And there are definitely at least 2 folks in this room that could probably deliver this presentation. So Jesse and Liz, I know you could probably help me out along the way here. So please, chime in or help me with questions at the end if you have something to add. So emergency support services. So imagine, you're standing outside your home, it's 2 a.m., it's cold, it's raining, something has happened to your home, an emergency has happened, you're not sure what is going to happen next, it's overwhelming, and so what happens? Well, thankfully, when this happens and Vancouver Fire and Rescue goes to a scene and sees that there are people that do need some support and some help, they will call our duty officer and ask for ESS to come out and meet with the folks that have been displaced. So 99% of the calls that we go to are related to house and apartment fires. There are other reasons that ESS could be activated if there was like a overland flood situation, but not so much if it's like a building failure. Usually that's covered under like a landlord's insurance or something. But for fires and sort of sudden emergencies, we can activate this team. And they really, the crux of it is that they're friendly faces, people who have seen this a few times, who kind of know what to do next, can be a bit of a guide. If support is needed, they can help make referrals, and I'll talk about exactly what, but essentials like food, clothing, and shelter are the things that we are primarily responsible for helping people with, but also can just be a listening ear, can help with encouragement of, yep, go back in and get the stuff you need and come back out and we'll talk about next steps. So a bit of a friendly face and a listening ear when an emergency happens on site. And these folks go straight to, can go straight to the scene. So often are meeting people right outside their homes after something has happened. Or we can, or usually both, we can set up at a facility like this here at like a community center and have people come to us and we can talk through people's needs and next steps in a setting like that. So at the top end of this, Emergency Support Services is a provincial program, so it's consistent across the province. Cities across BC have teams like this, and you may hear about them being activated for big kind of evacuations for wildfire, flooding, and other parts of the province. So there's some consistency with training, and they also sort of set the scene for what, or set the stage for what's eligible for ESS to provide supports, and so it's made up in Vancouver of both some of our staff that help to activate the program and will jump in and help as needed. And then we also have a volunteer team that does the majority of the responding work. And again, the goal of it is to help meet people's immediate and basic needs when people have been evacuated or displaced. And this is super important that we make these connections really early, because the longer you're not sure what to do next, the harder it is to sort of get recovered from something that disrupts your life like this. And so it provides this, what we call short-term support. It's really intended for be a bridging of 3 days, but I'll talk later about how that we go beyond that often. But around food, clothing, and this temporary accommodation. So with clothing, usually what we're doing is giving people a referral form to go to somewhere like Superstore, which is a partner, and they can take a form there and they get access to a certain amount of money that they can spend to grab some essentials. So if you've evacuated at your home but you only had what you were wearing, you can go get a jacket and a few extra pairs of clothes to meet your immediate needs. We also provide food, so when you're displaced, obviously you don't have access to your fridge, and that can be a real burden on people who have stockpiled food or have difficulty like purchasing food day to day. And so we will either help people again with a referral form to somewhere like Safeway or Superstore, where they can go and they'll have a certain amount of money that they can spend to get some food on a daily basis while they're under this ESS program. And then shelter. So shelter can be provided in a number of ways. Quite often we do use commercial accommodation if it's available, and if it's like sort of the best solution in the moment. But if it's a really large building or a big area, there's often times in this city when there's not hotels available. So if commercial lodging is not possible or we can't meet the needs through commercial lodging, then we will look at what we call group lodging. So we can set up and get those cots out of the containers, and we can set people up here as a sort of backup to them being able to find their own accommodation. Of course, if you can find your own accommodation, you have friends and family to stay with. This program does also allow us to give people what we call a shelter allowance, where it's, you can get a little bit of funds that maybe helps if you're gonna go stay with a friend to offset some of their costs, or if you have your own means to find accommodation, this can help bolster that. And then we can also help with referrals for things like pet food or like toiletries and things like that through incidentals. And as I said, this is meant to be very short-term support. It's meant to be a bridge, ideally, between this incident happening and when you can organize your insurance. But as we know, many people do not have insurance, or if they do have insurance, oftentimes cannot afford their deductibles. So in that case, this, we've had success in asking for this to be extended for folks to give people more time to settle in, start their search for housing, and have a roof over their head while they do that. Most recently, we just had an incident at an SRO downtown East Side, and we actually supported those folks for a month with a shelter arrangement. So it definitely gets stretched. And you'll see in other parts of the province when there's like major evacuations, sometimes those do go on for quite a long time, and they will continue to extend this. But it's not the rule, it's meant to be the exception. So. Again, having insurance is really important. It really means that you're going to avoid being in a cot in a gym with your neighbors. But of course, it's a solution if that's what's needed. I'll also just speak a little bit about how the different scale and scope of ESS activations. So I spoke about some of our level 1 pieces at the beginning. So we have events all the time that are displacing a couple of people. So an apartment fire has happened, but it was contained really fast. So there's just like 1 or 2 folks that are displaced, or 1 or 2 families. And that's sort of like a good chunk of what we respond to. Some of them are more significant, so more like a level 2, where you've got multiple families or a whole building that's occurred, and then you've got your major kind of complex disaster, which we might think about like kind of following an earthquake or other major event. The crane collapse, where we had an entire kind of neighborhood there. Yeah, so this can look a lot different depending on the scale. So like these kinds of events, no problem, we can handle with our team going out to the site, meeting with people where they are, and then moving them likely into commercial lodging. Level 2, level 3, maybe we need to come into a community center and spend more time processing people, finding out where they need to go, have a roof over our heads while we do that, because it could take some time. And then, if it's that sort of level 3, that's going to be a long kind of process, and we're going to need other services to come in and work with us, not just the ESS piece, so can get more complicated. So just to show that there's different kind of scales and scopes for this. And again, I kind of spoke to this, but ESS is provided on an as-needed basis. So just because you're displaced doesn't mean you need this. Sometimes we have folks that are displaced and fire says, Vancouver Fire will talk to them and say, hey, we can phone ESS. They're like, nah, we don't need it. We got relatives down the road, or we've got another way to kind of support ourselves. So it's as needed. And it's when folks really lack other options. And again, it's bridging that support between either when your insurance can kick in, or until you can kind of connect to another service, or until you can find housing. And we don't do this on our own. There's a lot of other organizations that we will call for support, because of course, those 3 things, food, shelter, and accommodation, are not people's only needs when they are displaced. So we look at things like psychological support through our health partners. There are other community-based organizations or nonprofits that often come in and support, especially in large evacuations. So like Salvation Army, Tzu Chi, those Canadian Red Cross. And then there's other groups like BC Housing that we might call on, or others depending on the type of incident.
So
So,
quickly, Miranda.
yeah.
I just spoke to Mayor and Council.
Oh, great.
Which one of these is, okay, so psychosocial is provincial.
Yeah.
Community navigators could be like a society? Or is that-
Community navigators could be a few different things. So, for example, we have our Carnegie Outreach team.
So that's city employees?
They're city employees. They do fantastic work,
Okay.
helping people every day connect to services, housing, making sure people have all the right paperwork filled in to get income assistance, all of that kind of stuff.
To get into the BC housing,
BC Housing, they'll work with private SROs. They'll help people validate if like a rental opportunity is a scam or not. Like they'll do a ton of things and set up showings and kind of help people with their rental agreements. And if they need a rent supplement, they'll try and cobble that together for them. So yeah, the community navigators piece is really important. But yeah, that could be our outreach team would be an example of that.
so about 3 of the 4 are city potentially.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. So like there's like our program, we manage the ESS program. And then, we lean on other places like our community centers for that. So that's also city, city-ish. No, city run
So everybody
and
write
city.
your council members.
Yes, we need all these services. And our provincial partners are in also, in having going through budget and we're just on strike and all of that kind of stuff. So all of these community services are super, super important to how we support people in crisis and day to day as well.
But it's still
Thanks,
funded
Liz.
by provincial, right?
Which the ESS
But when you
program.
said Carnegie, is that part of that, like you're saying that
Carnegie
it's
City.
But do they
Carnegie-
still get some provincial money, right?
So the staff are city employees.
Oh, I
I
see.
do believe that they get some funding through BC Housing to help offset some of the costs, but they are, exactly. So there's a lot of this work that's collaborative. Like ESS is collaborative. We have our staff that do all the planning and do all of the work and do all the volunteer training and meetings and all of that kind of stuff. We can, the province will pay for the referrals that we give out. So if you're put up in accommodation or if you are given a food referral, that gets billed back to the province. But all of the management of the work is
Still,
staff,
you need the cities.
is city, that's right. So it's a complicated, complex jurisdictional connection, as are most things in society. Yes, good questions.
One question I had, I was just wondering about gaps in the model.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I think things have shifted, maybe the role of the Red Cross from when I worked there, and it's,
Yeah.
different today than it was then.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
same with some of these other organizations. So what might be the gaps you think today?
Great
For the
question.
city of Vancouver anyways?
Yeah, I'd say, if you follow it through, the gaps that exist day to day for people exist when this comes to play. So if folks are not connected to the health system and they have mental health, if they have physical health, if they have, any of those kinds of things, if they need support navigating things like this, the ESS program is not, not social work. It's not case management. It's really, hey, what are your needs right now in terms of basic food, shelter, clothing? How can we help you get those? We adapt as we can. So for example, if people can't go out and get their clothes from Superstore, we will go do a bulk buy and bring a bunch of stuff in. Oh, it took too long answering your question, and now my computer went to sleep. There we go. There we go. So there's definitely gaps. If you have, mobility limitations, and there's only a limited number of hotels in the city that are truly like wheelchair accessible or mobility accessible. If you have special equipment that you need at home, it's not easy to kind of get those replaced and into a hotel setting or a group lodging setting. But I'd say a lot of it is really like that navigation support, and we've definitely met people in many of these responses that could have and should have been connected to more services and support that were not in their day-to-day life. And so then we can try to help make some of those connections throughout the response, and hopefully people actually end up better off in some ways after that, but that's not always the case. And if it takes too long or too much time, and this program is kind of time-based, there are some gaps there for sure. But I would say like it's the navigation of systems that's really hard. And so if folks aren't able to do that, I think that's some of the bigger gaps that we see. And of course, there's no like sort of magic solution through health, the health system, and places like that. If you have needs there, it can take time to get connected to the right service. I can touch more on that too as we go along, but I'll just sort of say, and then we'll kind of switch gears about the topic because I know we're getting on our time here. ESS is really central to how we do emergency management. It's really the people-focused side. It's the place where sort of the needs come to light in what people are experiencing in an emergency. So, we can go fix roads and we can fix bridges and we can do all of that kind of stuff. But this is really where, this interface is really where we see what an incident has in terms of its impact on people. So it's really critical part. And so the better kind of we are in being able to deploy teams like ESS, the better we are to be able to go through recovery and to do the right things in an emergency response. So that's kind of how we envision this team. And I'm just going to talk a bit about specifically in Vancouver how we do things. So in Vancouver, we have, as I said, staff and volunteers. We have about 100 ESS volunteers. Of course, not everyone comes out all the time. People are constantly shifting, as you well know if you're part of any volunteer organization. But we have a smaller sub-team of about 20 to 30 that are quite dedicated and get called out quite frequently. That they go to those level 1 calls. So the ones that I was mentioning where it's like the middle of the night and it's just a handful of people potentially side of the road getting called all the time. Liz is here and can speak to her years of service in this way. And then the team is also supported by some of our staff. And so we have one person on our team that's always on call 24/7, 365 days a year. And they help do that call out and they support the teams when they're deployed. And so I'll just skim through this, but we do have a bit of a structure. So our ESS team has this disaster assistance team that I mentioned, which is the smaller group. And they have DAT captains. Those are our long kind of standing or highly experienced folks. And then we have our responders, and then we're always kind of bringing in some trainees to learn the ropes. And then we have a bigger pool of general ESS volunteers, and they would activate for bigger emergencies. So depending if you're interested in joining, there's different ways and sort of different time commitments is really what this slide is meant to show.
It said deployable to other jurisdictions, so we've sent people to
That's right.
Chilliwack for the Lytton fires,
Yeah, I think I have
And to
some
Abbotsford.
info on that actually in the next slide.
but it was on the bottom of the last one.
Yeah, that's right.
Deployable to
So
other jurisdictions.
because what I mentioned at the beginning, where this is a provincial program, the idea is that we can do mutual aid to each other. So if, let's say, there's an atmospheric river and there's a bunch of people displaced in Abbotsford and Chilliwack, we can have some of our team go out and help relieve the folks from that city, which is something that has happened in the past.
And a few of the volunteers even got to fly to Chilliwack in
In a helicopter, that's right, because the road was closed. Yeah, so over the years, there have been a few call-outs where they've pulled folks from across the province to support Prince George, Kelowna, like all across the province. So yeah, thanks, Liz, good point. I'm just going to skip to this one because I think this is more interesting. This is just some 2024 statistics. So the blue chart, the blue line, which I know is probably pretty hard to see, that is our annual number of calls for emergency support services. So I think it starts at 2018, and this takes us to 2024. We don't have, obviously, all of our 2025 numbers on track, but we're kind of, I think, on pace for 2024 at least, if not more. And you can see that these have climbed, and there's a few reasons for that. One is that I think there's just more folks that we're in aging buildings that maybe aren't performing as well when there's fire that's occurring. But also people, we've seen a lot of folks who really have very few connections here or newcomers. And so don't have those connections, maybe haven't been here long enough to get set up with insurance or, get those kind of connections made. And so we're seeing a lot of those kinds of calls. And just, of course, it's very hard to find housing here. So if you're displaced, it's not as easy to just, pick up and call a friend and say, hey, you have that spare room, because people are renting their spare rooms. So it's definitely just, I think changed over time. And so we have seen quite a number of increase. But yeah, in 2024, I think we connected with about 400 people over about 57 incidents. Definitely another busy year for our team. And then here's where I had put in just those provincial requests for support. This doesn't reflect those deployments. So for example, in 2021, we had folks that went to support the Atmospheric River, the Lytton Fire, and then in other years, there's been other deployments as well. So that is just a little bit about how things look. And again, I'd say the vast majority of these call-outs were with that smaller team. And the larger team probably, like in this year, in 2025, I think we've called out the larger team maybe twice or 3 times, as opposed to the 57 that our smaller team gets called for. So if you're interested, I'm just going to go through a little bit about what it looks like to be a volunteer with us. So through the year, you're ready to go. Even if you're not getting called out all the time, we're looking for folks that are kind of keen and kind of interested in this area, so they're kind of ready and interested in participating with us through the year. You've got your personal preparedness ready to go. You're able to attend bi-monthly meetings for the larger team. You stay connected with us, attend debrief sessions. We try to do an information exchange when we can. We're actually doing an exercise this coming Sunday that is going to be to dust off some skills and do some practice. And so what it looks like is, we call out when we need. So it could be at any time of the night. You would come and then follow the instructions. So you would, if you're part of the smaller team, you might be getting deployed to a scene somewhere, a specific house, a specific neighborhood. If you're part of the bigger team, you're likely getting sent to come to a community center or other reception center that we might set up. You might be changing roles through the night. You might start doing one thing, and then as we get more people, we move you into another role. So having flexibility and adaptability is sort of what we need in our volunteers. But it's also rewarding. We hear from our volunteers that it's rewarding. So that is kind of what some of it looks like. But it can feel like, if you're part of the bigger team, it can feel like a lot of hurry up and wait. You don't know when there's going to be a call. So it can feel like a lot of training, and you're not sure if you're going to get to use that training. But that's a good thing. We would love for everyone to just be trained and never get a chance to use it, except for in exercises that we plan. But that's likely not the way it goes. We do, like I said, these sort of training sessions through the year. And then you're assisting evacuees in a variety of ways.
So the hurry up and wait also applies when you're 2 a.m. on the side of the road and you're trying to find hotels that will take these people.
Yeah, that's right, Liz. It is. It's like hurry up and get there, and then you talk to everyone, you find out what they need, and then you got to do the research to figure out, like, what's the plan? Where are we going to go? How's it going to go?
how they're gonna,
Or like waiting to see, can they go back in and get a few things once fire gives the okay? So there can be a lot of waiting around, but that's where like some of that like comfort comes in, and some of the listening ear, and that encouragement that our volunteers do give to the folks that are impacted. Good point, Liz. Waiting for something to happen, and then when it does happen, it can feel slow. So the commitment, so if our volunteers, as I mentioned, there are some standard training pieces available. So through the Justice Institute of BC, there's free training for ESS volunteers, and there's a number of courses that you can take online, and then we also try to host a couple each year. And so you could take those at any time on the JIBC's website. If you join our team, we do team meetings, and we just ask that you try to attend as many of those as you can. And then we do supplementary training, so maybe we'll bring in guest speaker, or we've done like disaster psychosocial training, or disaster first aid training. Disaster psychological first aid training, things like that. Violence prevention training are some of the examples of things that we supplement the Justice Institute's training with, and then the ESS response side of things, which is hopefully rare, but very important when the time does come. And as I said, our volunteers, sort of traits of ESS volunteers are, people who are available on short notice, because we cannot plan these, we can't give you any warning. You're keen to work with a team, you're okay to put your hand up to ask for help, and willingness to sort of be curious and adventurous and brave, and dive in and problem solve and listen to people, and those types of things. And so the volunteers that we have go through basically as their first step this exact presentation. So all of you here tonight are basically checking off the list this info session. And so if you decided that you wanted to take us up on it and join us, there are some info packages here that I did bring. And then you can take some of the JIBC training, and then we host, I think our next volunteer training is coming up in not until February. And of course, I think, many of you know the reward of volunteering your time. It can help you grow professionally, personally. It can be a way to meet people. You might get to travel to Chilliwack.
on a helicopter.
And really it's about making a difference at the end of the day. So again, if you're interested in it, you've already achieved one level here. We have our ess@vancouver.ca account. You can send us an email and just say you were here tonight, and we'll help you navigate the next steps. We do require a vulnerable sector check through the police information check process, and then some training. Upcoming events, I mentioned just as a teaser that we do have this exercise on Sunday. It's not open to the public, it's not open, but just to share that we do those types of things. And we're really excited about that one. And then we always have sort of team meetings. So usually in January, we'll do kind of a kickoff for the year. So that's coming up on January 15th. And then we have our next training session on February 2nd. And that is all of my talking. So I'm sure there are questions. Happy to take them on either the ESS piece or more broadly on our emergency management work in the city.
Anyone have any questions? Look at this.
I was wondering, in the event of a large event, how do you manage triage
Like triage in terms of
between
areas of the
event
city?
severity and number of people involved and
Yeah.
severity of impact?
Great, gotcha. Good question. So there's a few different ways. So number one is our first responders out there on scene, are going to be out there, and they're going to be dealing with what they see. Like initially, it's going to be life safety, and as soon as there's something that they see that they can deal with, they will. We do have other processes that will be activated. So I mentioned we have those disaster staging areas. There's city staff that are tasked to like go to those locations and start doing sort of what we call like windshield assessments. So, driving around, looking around what's happening in in the area around those centers. And that's another way we'll figure out what's going on. Of course, there's also things like public information coming in, reports, 911 calls that we can sort of see areas that are more of concern. If you have tons of calls coming in from one area, those kinds of things. So those are some of the really like practical ways. But then there's also like through the province, there's guiding principles around emergency management that are built into kind of best practice for emergency management, and there's what's called the BC Emergency Response System goals, and those kind of give us a list of things that we should prioritize. So life safety and responder safety are the top two things. So we can't put our responders into situations that are unsafe, but we also need to respond to life safety issues. And then it kind of cascades down from there. It's like health and well-being. There's things like environmental protection and critical infrastructure protection and things like that. So there's sort of a hierarchy of those that's listed out that we would use for some of those like macro level kind of decisions. But I'd say like early on in a major event, it's going to be that like, what are those calls that are coming in? What are our first responders dealing with? And what's being kind of reported into the city that we can then allocate resourcing to.
And also confirmation of what's coming in.
That's right, validating all of that stuff, exactly. So sending folks out to get a look at things, for sure. Yeah.
Is there a way of designating, like, I just think of ESS friendly, let's say, a community center would have not a badge, but some kind of like a symbol saying that, they're trained, and then especially with seniors housing, like I was thinking of, well, obviously the dementia and stuff like that. So there'll be, it just gives it a comforting level that, they're using it for apparently retail stores would say dementia friendly or something, but neighborhoods which. Maybe there's a training, but people don't know, so that's kind of like a public sharing kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really nice idea. I like that. We don't have those symbols right now. I think that is definitely something that we could do a better job of is really like that communication side, because our community centers serve so many purposes. They're cooling centers. We do work with some of them that have better air circulation that we can promote people to when there's wildfire smoke. They're here and on ready if we need to activate for group lodging or reception centers. Like they're playing so many different roles, and like indicating that in some way, I think would help us like promote and draw attention to those. So it's a really great idea. Yeah.
Just feel safer, right?
Yeah, or like have that like reminder when you're walking in the door that like, oh, this is a place. Yeah, that's a nice idea. Thanks for that.
Any other questions?
Maybe it's not just about ESS, but there's been a lot more noise on the media, of course, just around being prepared for emergencies and disasters and so forth. And then there was the result of your survey that was done last year that you made some comments to. How much do you think has the messaging that you're doing and the work you're doing, because you have very limited staff, is the level of awareness has increased, or can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I can try. I mean, it's really hard to gauge this. Like, we did this survey. We did that same survey or a similar survey before I started with the city, I think back in 2018, but we had far lower participation. So I think that speaks a little bit to some of the interest in this topic. I think worldwide events have drawn people into thinking about these things more. I think we have done in a variety of ways a better job of getting information out, making information more accessible to people in multiple languages. That increases our risk by a long shot. Having things like social media helps because there's a lot of people that connect that way, but we've also been trying to use traditional media through radio and things like that, especially for like things like heat, where we think that, some of the folks that are most vulnerable may be more likely to be tuned into radio than checking social media and things like that. But it's a hard one to answer because gauging people's preparedness, it's really tricky. I do think that there's like more awareness generally about some of these concepts. We speak to people who are like, oh, I've been meaning to get insurance. I've been meaning to set up my emergency kit. Like, oh, I heard about that, but I wasn't sure what to do about it. So I think people have an escalated level of awareness, but maybe haven't always taken the steps to do something about it. And that's where, like I said, that report kind of confirmed some of what we assumed, but also gave us some really interesting insights about where we can do more to encourage people to understand that you don't have to do 100 different steps to be prepared. You don't have to do things that are expensive. You could do one thing, which, would be just to like talk to your family about your own home. Maybe secure a shelf to the wall that's not secured to the wall. Maybe you just put a little kit together from things that you already have around the house. So there's lots of steps that you can take, and then if you do those things, then you could bump up to the next level kind of a thing. And so we really want to just sort of shift the messaging, because I do think historically emergency management and emergency preparedness language has been very like scare tactic almost, or has been like, you must do this, this, and this. And so that doesn't, people don't get gravitated to that as much as they do if it's more practical and more, connected to where they live or what they're doing, and, kind of coming to them through various channels, which is also really important, that it's not just like the voice of government, but, you're hearing it from your peers. That helps people take action. And so those are some of the things I think that report really emphasizes. That's where some of those other programs that I was talking about, like that amplifier network, where we want to gather different community groups that are interested in this kind of work to help us be another voice. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's hard to it's really hard to gauge. But I think we're doing more, and incidents that have happened in the city boost people's awareness too. So the 2021 heat dome, tragic event, and we all learned what extreme heat is from that. And now people are like, yeah, I know what too hot is. And will take steps, are taking steps to protect themselves and their loved ones more in response to that now. So events around the world, events here, definitely have, I think, boosted people's understanding. Yeah. But it's not done yet.
Maybe one more question, if anyone has one.
I'll make a comment.
Sure, Liz.
Sorry, I'm on this talk to your council people, but there are only 20,000 hotel rooms in the lower mainland, like Metro Vancouver, and we expect about 114,000 to 140,000 people to show up for FIFA. So that's 3.5 weeks of FIFA games. So even if we all have somebody we can stay with, think of all those people who don't have somebody they can stay with, and there's no hotel for them. So we can't drop our 400 staff people at this point.
You could make money renting out to FIFA people, though, right? Okay. So, great.
Thank you so much. Great discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming, and stay in touch. We'll hopefully be having more of these sort of things in the new year. So.
Great. Yes, please do. Yeah, reach out to us if you.